This is a disastrous situation for Russia now. And I'm not sure that everyone recognizes just how does it. This is worse than Afghanistan. Remember, they left Afghanistan, and the government they left behind stayed in power for 2 years. This is going to be a terrible, painful retreat for them.
So that mass grave is the result of what is positive progress for Ukrainian forces taking back territory after a very swift retreat, really, from Russians in the northeast. The second big retreat we've seen since the start of this invasion, including that around the capital, Kyiv. What does that mean about the state of the war right now? Has the momentum fundamentally shifted?
It has fundamentally shifted, Jim. And, I'm normally fairly guarded and cautious about this, but the tide clearly has turned, because the success of this offensive, as important as it is itself on the ground, what really is important is that it reflects a hugely important development, a new reality, that Ukraine has been incomparably better than Russia in recruiting, training, equipping, organizing, and employing additional forces, while Russia has been struggling to do just that, literally running out of soldiers, ammunition, tanks, fighting vehicles, and so forth. The Ukraine supported superbly by the U.S. and NATO, whereas Russia, even if it declared mobilization today, could not reverse this fundamental reality. So the implications are stark. They're very, very clear. Ukraine will, over time, and yes, tough fighting, more casualties, more punishing Russian strikes on civilian infrastructure, but Ukraine will, over time, I think, retake the territory that Russia has seized since 24 February. And it's even conceivable now that they could retake Crimea and the Donbass. And by the way, along with what's going on in the front lines, there is insurgent activity now picking up in the Russian rear areas carried out by Ukrainians there as well. So again, this is going to take time. There will be tough fighting, all of that. But this is a disastrous situation for Russia now. And I'm not sure that everyone recognizes just how does it. This is worse than Afghanistan. Remember, they left Afghanistan, and the government they left behind stayed in power for 2 years. This is going to be a terrible, painful retreat for them. And again, the outcome just is, I don't think, in doubt anymore. Ukraine will prevail unless there's some unforeseen development. And as long as we continue to provide the weapons, and of course you noted the latest announcement about that, I'm confident we will continue to do everything that they need to help them build on the momentum that they have now achieved and carry this all the way through to victory, frankly.
So let me ask you your read of Putin's next move.
Well, again, full mobilization is too late. And beyond that, they've stripped their training base. They don't have the replacement vehicles. The export sanctions on microchips to Russia have crushed their industrial base and so forth. So that's too late. The consideration of tactical nuclear weapons, yes, you could have a tactically very disastrous situation, but it doesn't change the fundamental realities, which are that Russia just cannot generate the forces, much less employ them capably and competently. Their morale is rock bottom. They're not even sure what they're fighting for other than a paycheck or perhaps to stay out of jail. The morale on the Ukrainian side is sky high. They're winning. So the question at first is, can the Russians find new defensive lines, or do they have to fall all the way back in the east, for example, to the original lines of the Donbass, where there are very considerable, almost World War I like defenses? And then how do they hang on in these other locations? Yes, they'll find places where there are urban settings that they can use effectively and fight hard. Again, there will be tough fighting, tough casualties, a lot more damage. But Russia is in, again, a truly disastrous situation at this point in time. And crossing the nuclear threshold would be so profound. And the benefit of that, quote, benefit would not be as profound. So I think, again, he's in a very difficult position. What he's going to do now is try to change the narrative and blame others and all the rest of this and find some way to explain why the special operation has failed.
In your view, is President Putin's leadership now in jeopardy, given all he's invested in this invasion?
Well, he still clearly has a very, very solid grip on power in Russia. But this does obviously call that into question somewhat. And somewhere there are going to be individuals who are going to be raising serious questions. There have been officials, of course, from St. Petersburg that suggested he should resign. They ended up in jail, but then there were others from St. Petersburg and Moscow. So again, he's in a precarious situation, I think, although it's so difficult to predict. Someone who has been an autocrat, obviously, what is that moment that pushes them off the throne? And of course, he's a kleptocrat on top of everything else, and everyone is empowered by him. So, but what he has done to his country, again, as I think we mentioned before, he set out to make Russia great again. What he's really done is make NATO great again. And by the way, this changes the dynamic, I think, with respect to European and U.S. reluctance to say that Ukraine should be able to join NATO. Given what Russia has done, there has to be a security guarantee at the end of this. The only credible guarantee is NATO membership. And we can then say, look, you brought this on yourself. We were very sensitive to your feelings before. We did not want to needlessly provoke you. You have needlessly and unprovoked invasion of your neighbor. And this is the price that you're going to pay as a result of that.
Putin, is there any way he can end this disaster and survive?
I think he still looks in the mirror, though, and sees not someone who made a horrifically bad decision for his country and for himself, but rather someone who is a strong, determined, visionary leader who leads a people who have outsuffered Napoleon's armies and outsuffered the Nazis, and they think that they're going to outsuffer the Europeans, the Ukrainians, the Americans, and others. Neither side, I don't think at this point, is at all inclined to negotiate. Each side thinks that it is going to prevail over time. And so I think we're in for many more months of very tough fighting, noting that I think Russia is in a very difficult position, a very dire situation where Ukraine, a country less than 1/3 their size and without all of the energy and mineral wealth that Russia has managed to build an army that is bigger and more capable than Russian forces on Ukrainian soil, obviously with enormous help from the United States and the Western world. I'm not sure how Putin ultimately gets himself out of this. You know, history shows that those who lose wars in Russia don't have particularly bright futures. But the Ukrainians, this is their war of independence. We can't overstate the stakes for them. They are fighting for their very survival. The entire country has been mobilized. Their president has proven to be a positively Churchillian leader in all of this. He's got a very impressive chief of the general staff. And what they've done is beyond impressive, beyond remarkable, really. I mean, this is right versus wrong in my mind. It's democracy, however imperfect, against autocracy or kleptocracy. The stakes are very high, not just for Ukraine, but also, I think, for the Western world writ large that cherish the values that they're fighting for as well.